Hello and welcome along to another edition of the Westminster Roundup of the Sport and Recreation Alliance. I'm your host, Alex Sexton, and I'm pleased once again to be joined by the Parliamentary Policy Officer for the Alliance, Ryan McCulloch.
Hi Alex, how are you?
I'm keeping very well, getting very much used to these Zoom meetings. How are you?
Yeah, the same, getting used to these virtual experiences now.
It's something that we're having to adapt as a sector towards, and it's something that's been embraced, which is great to see. Something else that's being embraced is accessing the huge amount of support that continues to be put out there via government, via Sport England, and via the Alliance. I know one of the areas that we're still concentrating on for our members is funding. Ryan, can you give us the latest as to pots of funding that's available and how people can access that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We obviously know there's been a vast amount of finance and kind of business support measures introduced by the Chancellor. Some have been drip-fed in, self-employment, charity money, etc. And he announced a new one in Parliament this week, which we didn't really have any idea about, but they're calling them microloans or bounce-back loans is what they'll be known as. They're not launched until Monday, the 4th of May, but it essentially is a loan for anywhere between for 25% of turnover, essentially anywhere between £2,000 and £50,000. So 50,000 is the upper limit. And the idea is that they are quick access money for businesses. They are a loan, so they will be repayable. And I think there's also the possibility that they are taxable. But the idea with this loan is to help smaller businesses and with smaller loans. And it's a less bureaucratic process, essentially, and you should get a decision in 24 hours. So obviously, as with a lot of government announcements, there'll be a lot of people possibly trying to get it on Monday, so it may be slower to start off with. But the idea is that once you apply for the money, you should have a decision in 24 hours.
And is that pot of funding aimed at community clubs, member organisations? Who can access that?
Yeah, so it's aimed at any kind of smaller businesses, really, I think. So anybody who has, who takes turnover, if you're a for-profit business and you make turnover or whatever, then you can apply for it as it's designed to be a really short-term injection if you need to pay bills, for example. You might want to take 2,000, you can take up to 50,000, depends how much your liabilities are. Obviously, I would caution with that there are, it's possibly taxable and you do have to repay it, albeit it's interest-free for the first year.
And that's not the only pot of funding that's around at the moment. And in fact, we're encouraging the sector to think creatively about how they can access different finances. I know you had something else you wanted to mention.
Yeah, this one's an interesting one, actually, because it's something you wouldn't necessarily think that our members could be eligible for, but certainly our members who operate as charities in particular, each year, and this has actually been happening for 2 or 3 years now, the government there is VAT on women's sanitary products, the so-called tampon tax, and the government has been redistributing the money that they make from that towards charitable causes that help with women and girls issues. So you're available to apply for that at the moment. You have to apply for $1 million or more, which is quite a substantial amount of money. But charities and philanthropic organisations can apply for that money. And it's broadly in 3 categories. So if you do work that benefits violence against women and girls issues, that's one criteria. There's also any schemes that benefit women and girls' mental health, which I think plenty of our members would have a focus there. And then there's what they call a general pot, which is, but there's quite a few things in there, but there's a mention of sport and physical activity in there. And why it's sort of interesting at the moment is that there is a focus on coronavirus and anybody that's doing work that helps support women and girls through coronavirus, and particularly around, obviously we've seen a huge increase in domestic violence at the moment. So anybody whose work is helping in any of those areas can apply from this money that comes in from the so-called tampon tax. And the deadline for applications there is the 31st of May. I think what we'll do is link through to the government pages, because some of it's quite complex and there's quite a lot of criteria. So rather than going to all here, we'll link it through with this video. Members who think they might be eligible can take a look, but they can always get in touch with me if they've got any questions about it.
Certainly, we'll add those links to the page that this video accompanies. You can also check out our COVID-19 support pages for additional information around all sorts of different funding that you can access at this present time. Now, I know that the Easter recess is over for Parliament. Everybody's getting back into the routine. And as that's your area of expertise, Ryan, let's delve back into that. What's been happening in Westminster this week?
Well, it's all very strange. It's all strange goings on in Westminster. So they came back last week, obviously. Parliament approved virtual proceedings. So much like you and I are doing this now, a lot of MPs are asking questions to ministers over different video channels, which is very odd because you've got the speaker in the House, the person at the dispatch box, and then possibly someone up on a big screen above everybody's heads. But this week it was sort of our turn, if you like, our sector's turn. So DCMS had questions this week, almost entirely focused pretty much broadly on the coronavirus crisis, and a lot of different sports asking about different issues to do with coronavirus, highlighting the work that they're doing, funding that's available or not available, etc. Interestingly enough, the one thing that I took out of it was Maria Eagle asking the government in the tourism and heritage sector part of the questions, actually, about some of the government support that's available. So she mentioned that plenty of businesses who are still considered small businesses, and I think we all know that there are plenty of clubs across the country that fit into this category, who are just above the current rateable value threshold of 51,000 for a grant under the Retail, Hospitality and Leisure grant, still have huge financial issues and could be missing out. So she asked the government whether they could sort of see to an extension of that, or possibly an increase in the threshold, which I thought was interesting. And she also talked about support for self-employed people and those small businesses on very low sort of incomes who've still got high overheads. And while she was kind of referring to heritage and tourism, I don't see why that wouldn't apply to our sector. Unfortunately, she didn't seem to get much of an answer. And I understand it's difficult for government, but we'll keep an eye on that because it's an interesting point. As I said, we know a lot of clubs in the sports sector will have the same issues. We also had PMQs this week. There was a lot of chat. It was quite interesting. There was a lot of chat on Twitter about will Boris Johnson, won't he? And then it was announced he wouldn't, and everyone was saying, "Oh, okay, that's very interesting." 5 minutes later, the news that he's just had a baby came. So you had Dominic Raab and Keir Starmer at PMQs this week.
And of course, everyone at the Lions will add their congratulations to the Prime Minister and his partner for giving birth to a healthy baby boy. But of course, the goodwill didn't last for too long, and we know that Labour were really pressing the government for some answers around any potential relaxation in social distancing or lockdown restrictions. We know that's been a question that's high on the lips of everybody, including those in our sector. What was the fallout from that, Ryan?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Alex, because Labour have been asking now for sort of a week and a half, 2 weeks. I think the weeks roll into one. It's been about a week and a half, 2 weeks for the government to publish what they're calling the exit strategy, if you like. So how we move from the lockdown phase, how we come out of that, a staged exit, what's it going to look like? They want to know. And government have been saying that they don't think it's right to do that at the moment. They want to follow what they call the SAGE guidelines. So that's the advisory group for emergencies that the government has medical experts on it, and they, as they say, follow the science. And I think this is an important point to raise when you talk about our sector, because we have had a number of queries about how we come out of this, and we are working with DCMS in a number of ways, but at the moment the advice is that we are still in lockdown with all the social distancing that's in place, and that is where we very much have to focus our effort at the moment. When we have anything else that we might find out, then we will relay it to members, but right now we are encouraging members to just continue to do what they're doing and listen out for announcements from us, really.
And legally, the government do have to provide an update by next Thursday, I believe it is, about the continuation of lockdown and the impact of that, any potential easing. So we may well see more movement on this next week.
We might do, yeah. And I think you've sort of hit on the issue there, is that we don't know what the government are going to say next week. We don't have any backdoor channels to number 10, unfortunately. So we don't know what the government or the scientific advice, in fact, is even going to be, because the government have said they're following that. So at the moment, I think it's possibly a little bit almost premature in some ways to be talking about how we come through this. I know we have to plan for it, but at the moment, we must follow the government advice firstly, because it is obviously for the safety of everybody.
And that's absolutely what we will be doing. And as Ryan mentions, as soon as there is progress on that, our members will be the first to know, and we'll provide those updates as and when appropriate. Thank you very much for joining us today, Ryan, and going through some of the headlines of the previous week. If any of our members do have any questions policy related, how can they get hold of you?
A number of ways. That I would say that the best and easiest way to get hold of us is the policy inbox, which is policy@sportandrecreation.org.uk. And we've been dealing with a great number of queries in there from members, and we've been trying our best to get answers, to raise them with DCMS, and that's definitely the best way to get in touch with us.
And I'm sure, as our members can appreciate, we're receiving a lot of these emails, and Ryan and the policy team are working their hardest to try and respond to you as soon as possible. We appreciate your patience on any queries we're flagging and raising with the right stakeholders. We want to make sure you get the correct information as soon as possible, so thank you for your support with that. If you want to get in touch with the Sport and Recreation Alliance directly, you can tweet us at SportRecTweet, and our DMs are open as well if there is anything else you'd like to know on a more one-to-one basis. Finally, I would like to push you in the direction of our Catch a Coffee webinars that are being hosted throughout May. Lots of fantastic sessions on there from sector experts and knowledgeable professionals leading us through marketing, governance, all sorts of areas where you can spend some time virtually connecting with us and with the sector and learning a bit more during lockdown. Thank you again, Ryan, for joining us. A really useful session, I hope, for our members out there. We'll be returning with another Westminster Roundup very soon. Take care for now.